All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little post-draft look at the 49ers. And, of course, check out Pig and a Pickle, 2 locations. They're in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week in Marin County from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. They're open Wednesday through Sunday in Emeryville. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. All right, let's talk a little bit about the draft. Who knows more about the draft than anybody? Mel Kiper Jr. Well, Mel goes through, and, this is a little bit, these day after grades are a little bit of an exercise, but Mel's the guy, and he gave the 49ers the lowest grade of any of the teams in the NFL. Mel didn't like the Niners draft. He says the Niners draft is one of the worst of any team. And he said, "What a strange draft class to try to grade. What a strange class to try to grade. The 49ers entered day one with 11 total picks, but 0 in rounds 1 or 2. Trades for Trey Lance and Christian McCaffrey depleted their capital. Instant impact rookies can come from any round, of course, but it's asking a lot to guarantee that any of these guys will play early and often. And who knows? Maybe they found the next Brock Purdy in here somewhere." He said the biggest issue with this class is where is the offensive tackle? With Mike McGlinchey gone, Colton McKivitz really going to be the starting right tackle? That's a miss based on my list of their pre-draft needs. So, I get it. I totally get it. The 49ers took a kicker in the 3rd round. Kiper said he wasn't even his favorite kicker in the draft. He said that's way too early for a kicker, and I tend to agree. But the kicker, the round that normally the kickers go in is the 4th round, and the Niners didn't have a 4th round pick, and they had a conviction on this kicker. Jake Moody, they called him Money. They called him Money Moody. He had 4 kicks in the college football playoffs. He made all 4. Who does that sound like? Robbie Gould. So I'm not saying that it was a great draft by the Niners, but I think, first of all, a couple things on Mel's grade. One, he gave everybody a pretty good grade. He gave the Eagles, the Niners' #1 competition in the NFC this year, an A grade. And there's no question, I thought the Eagles had a terrific draft. But to give the Niners the lowest grade, and then, when I looked at what exactly, I figured, he gave them the lowest grade. It was probably an F, or maybe it was a D. But Kiper must be a soft grader in his older age because he gave him a B-. So every draft, according to Mel, was a B or better, except for the Niners and a couple other teams that had a B- draft. So I think his grades have gotten kind of soft through the years. The story that I read, Mel gave the Niners the worst grade. I'm like, well, he probably panned their draft. A B- is the worst grade? I'd love to have been in that class where the worst grade's a B-. But I get it. You look at what the 49ers did in this class. He said he had a 2nd-round grade on Jair Brown. I think Brown's a plug-and-play starter. I think he starts at free safety much of the year. I understand panning Jake Moody, but if the 49ers really, really badly wanted Jake Moody and they felt he wasn't going to be there when they picked in the 5th round, to take him with a compensatory late 3rd, almost like an early 4th round pick when you look at how many comp picks there are, it's not that big a deal. It's only a big deal because it was day 2, and there's a day that separates it. If the best kickers were coming off the board early in day 3 in the 4th round, probably nobody says anything about it. But what, day 2? You took a day 2 kicker? Oh, my God, So I get that. I understand why he was critical. But to me, if you get a money kicker, the Niners have been very spoiled. Robbie Gould's never missed in the playoffs. That's what they're used to. Niner fans are used to their kicker making pressure kicks. So, I'll go with the kicker, Jake Moody, who Harbaugh says is the greatest kicker in the history of Michigan football, who also was money in under pressure and was considered to be a great pressure kicker. I'll take my chances there. Is it going to work out? Who knows? Roberto Aguayo was taken in the 2nd round. He washed out of the league in 1 year. And we all have that fresh in our minds. So, Nobody ever mentions that the Raiders took Sebastian Janikowski in the first round, and he had a great career and kicked forever and gave them incredible value long after most of the guys picked in and around him were in retirement or coaching or on to their next career. Seabass was kicking for the Raiders. So if Jake Moody becomes a 10-year pro and a great kicker for the Niners, nobody's going to care that they used a compensatory selection on him at the end of the third round. But for draft grades the day after, I can see where you can pan that. I totally understand. And also, I'm not a huge fan of the tight end, but the more I watch Latu, the more I think, he's a high-end athlete. And I kind of like his athleticism more than and his athletic upside and profile, more than many of the tight ends that were still available to them when he came off the board. I didn't like that pick when it was announced. To me, Darrell Luter is a terrific pick on day 3. I think, Kiper admitted that D. Winters went, about 50 or 60 picks after where he projected him to go. In other words, in his mind, D. Winters, the linebacker from TCU, was great value. He feels like Braden Willis is a guy who's going to make the team and be a really good special teamer. And Braden Willis was a guy they met with and really liked. So he didn't comment on the other guys for the most part, but he gave their draft grade a B-. I would say this. Last year, the 49ers did not have a first-round pick. Their first draft choice was Drake Jackson. I guarantee you that probably nobody had a high grade on the 49ers draft class last year. But Drake Jackson played a significant role. Spencer Burford started at right guard all season long. Brock Purdy became Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the draft, became a starting caliber quarterback who was one game away from leading his team to the Super Bowl. And nobody really thought that was a great draft. Now, I don't have Mel's grade from last year in front of me on what he thought about it, but I guarantee you nobody thought last year's draft class was all that great. And if you go and look at the 49ers, their roster and how many guys made the team from last year's draft class or after the draft, look at how many guys were rookies on last year's team. It's a lot. It's a lot. They added a ton last year in the draft. Danny Gray, rookie. Tay Martin, rookie at wide receiver. Offensive line-wise, they added Nick Zakelj and Spencer Burford and Jason Poe. They added 3 quality rookies along the offensive line last year. They added Brock Purdy. We've already discussed him. They added Jordan Mason and Ty Davis-Price. Mason after the draft. They added Drake Jackson and Kalia Davis. Kalia Davis has yet to play. They added Marcelino McCrary-Ball, who's going to step into a significant role this summer. And they added to their secondary as well with Samuel Womack. And Quantrez Knight, another player that's going to be in camp competing for a spot this summer. So when you really look at it, there was a bunch of rookies that contributed on the roster or on the practice squad last year for the 49ers. And I think that you look at the number of players that are still going to be with this team in a year or two from now that came from last year's draft class, it's going to be a very high number. And I guarantee you it wasn't a highly rated draft class. So Kiper said this year's draft class was the worst. And I do understand, but look at it this way. Kiper in his mock draft, and I'm surprised he didn't mention this, Kiper in his most recent mock draft had the last one he did before the draft, had the 49ers at pick number 99 with their first round draft, with their first pick of the draft at the end of the third round, taking Joey Fisher, an offensive tackle from Shepherd, that Mel said, hey, you know what? The Niners really like him. Joey Fisher from Shepherd ran 4.9 in the 40, which would have been the fastest of any offensive lineman at the combine. He had 40 reps at 225. That also would have been the biggest number of reps of any offensive lineman at the combine. So you're telling me he's the strongest offensive lineman at the combine and the fastest offensive lineman at the combine, and you projected him to go in the third round. But he signed with the 49ers after the draft. and you're still going to give them the lowest grade? You projected him to go in the third round, and they got him as an undrafted free agent. And you're saying that they didn't address the tackle spot? They took your guy, the guy that you projected them to take, and they took him several rounds after. To me, that's great value. How can they get the lowest grade in the draft if you're suggesting that their first pick should have been an offensive lineman, and they got that offensive lineman, and they got him as an undrafted free agent? So I think Kiper's just not factoring in any of the undrafted free agents. And all I would say is, when you look at the Niners from last year, Tay Martin was undrafted and Marcelino was undrafted. And the Niners have had this great run. Kalia Davis was a 6th-round pick. Samuel Womack was a day 3 pick. They do a really nice job. Jordan Mason is to me like a poor man's Marshawn Lynch, undrafted free agent. So the undrafted free agents absolutely matter. They absolutely factor in. To do day after the draft evaluations on just the draft class, to me, is like taking a picture, of half of a sunrise or half of a sunset. It's like you're not getting the full picture. But I thought that was really interesting. So Mel Kiper projects Joey Fisher to go to the Niners in the 3rd round. They had 11 picks, and he said they should have used their top pick of the 11 picks on Joey Fisher. They get him as an undrafted free agent, and he bangs on them for not taking a tackle. What if they had taken Joey Fisher in the 3rd round? Would they have gotten a better grade than they did by drafting him or getting him after the draft? So whatever. I mean, it's not that big a deal. Time will tell. I just think that when I did the deep dive on the 49ers undrafted rookie free agents in this class, I see some difference makers. I see Joey Fisher making the team. I see Ronald Awatt, the running back from UTEP, potentially making the team. I see Deshaun Jameson, the corner return man from Texas, making the team. I see Jadakiss Bonds, the receiver from Hampton, who was a star for the HBCU school, who scored 34 touchdowns in 40 games. I see him as a undrafted free agent sleeper. So I think ultimately Kiper is going to probably go, well, he can say it's the worst draft, but he still gave it a B-. So that right there is kind of a soft grade. But all I got to say is, if Mel were standing here, I'd be like, Mel, they took the guy that you wanted them to take in the 3rd round. They got him after the draft. Does it matter that they spent a 3rd-round pick on Jake Money Moody, if they got the tackle that you said they should get and they got him after the draft? Why can't you just pretend that Moody was an undrafted free agent and that the tackle was the 3rd-round pick? Instead, because they took him in the other order, now it's been a bad draft. Anyway, time will tell on this draft. I think overall, I love Jair Brown. I think he's a tone-setting difference maker in their secondary. I think Darrell Luter is a tremendous corner. And I'm not saying this is a perfect draft. We'll see how it all shakes out. It's going to take some time for the whole thing to kind of come to fruition and find out one way or another. But Mel Kiper gave the 49ers the lowest draft grade of any team in pro football. It's only a B-, and they wound up signing the guy that he wanted them to take in the 3rd round as an undrafted free agent, but it was still a low-rated draft. Go figure. Anyway, thanks for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube. Thanks to our sponsor, Pig and a Pickle. Check them out in Corte Madera and in Emeryville. And once again, thanks to all of you for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.